Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about Nicholas's speech on animal testing. He claimed that animal testing is not only cruel and unjust, but unnecessary and inadequate. He tried to prove this by claiming that harmful drugs still enter the market because of the genetic differences between animals and humans, that human cell cultures and computer models are more effective, and that animals show as much pain as humans, therefore we shouldn't be testing on them. For his first claim that humans are so genetically different from animals that drugs will still enter the market, he used a claim that proved that humans and mice were genetically different, and that what was tested on mice wasn't necessarily proving anything for humans. However, throughout his talk, he talked about the differences between humans and primates, which he had no evidence to support. And as we know, humans are much closer to primates than they are to mice. On his second point, that human cell cultures and computer models were more effective than animal testing, he used a source from PETA, which is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which is known as a very biased source that will that is very much for animal rights. Thirdly, he tried to prove that animals showed as much pain as humans, and that it is cruel and unjust to test on them. His source on this was a book named Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. And Peter Singer is an advocate for animal rights, and he's one of the people at the forefront for the animal liberation movement. And for this reason, I do not believe he can be trusted as a source to give both sides of the issue. Also, I'd like to propose that even if animals do show pain, if we stop testing on the animals, and the drug went directly to the market, we would have humans having this same pain, and it would be in much greater numbers than a controlled laboratory sample. In the end, while there may be reasons why we should stop animal testing, the biased evidence and misapplied data is insufficient to persuade me, and I hope you, to stop animal testing.
All right, Chris, the issue, the whole argument that you just presented, I'll tell you what it sounds like. It sounds like the response that you, where are you? That you would give like immediately after hearing that, without an opportunity to do any research, without any additional evaluations. If I had to get up immediately after having heard that speech, I didn't have anything in my ammunition belt to shoot back at, what could I say about it? And I think you found the right presses to put on those points, but I think you've had a little bit of time, and it really feels thin. It's just like I've got a couple of questions or challenges that I can make that are very generic, and I think that is problematic. The idea that humans are closer to primates, and so the evidence ought to be referring to primates more frequently, well, that's an okay idea there, although I'm not exactly sure that the advocate's evidence necessarily excluded primates, and even if it did, you don't have any evidence that shows that we've gotten any significant advantages from those sorts of things. The second point doesn't really even talk about the way those alternatives work. It just talks about the source that you're talking about. And although I think the PETA people are probably a little bit crazy, and I think that's probably a reasonable challenge to make here, you need to explain why they're crazy. And maybe not everybody knows that. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, that sounds perfectly fine. What's wrong with PETA? You need to explain why they are an outlandish group. The same thing with the guy Singer, who's the animal liberation forces. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that those are the people that are bombing labs and that are setting free animals in zoos and are engaged in, attacks on researchers who conduct this kind of research. And so, in essence, you're quoting a terrorist in advocacy of their own point in that particular situation. Then I think you could make the argument that this is really not a source that we ought to rely on. But you haven't presented any information like that. You're assuming that that is the case without providing any proof on it, and I think that that's a little problematic. I do think that the argument about humans potentially going through the pain rather than the animals is a reasonable one, although this is, we're on the brink on that whole third point of having a value argument rather than a claim of fact on this issue. One thing that sometimes gets ignored here, and I'm not sure why it happens on a regular basis, any medication that gets tested on animals is then tested on human beings also before it gets released to the market. So the notion that the risks are assumed just by animals is definitely not an accurate one. And in fact, the fact that products don't make it to the marketplace because of failures in human testing simply means that we're looking any place for information. The fact that we look someplace and don't find the answer doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop looking or that we should stop looking. I think that's the argument to make. Like I said, if you were giving this argument just on the spur of the moment immediately after having heard the argument, I think you got the right presses on it. But with 2 weeks preparation, it really feels very thin. All right, thank you.